Okay, time to stop dragging my feet in terms of starting this. So we open up, I roll the weather, and we get a 7 in January, February. That's not terribly good. Snow up here going into the northern temperate, storms in the Mediterranean, and storms over here in the southern monsoon. Probably not a big deal. I don't expect anybody to be taking any military actions. However, we have a fixed setup for positioning. I'm going to go over things in some detail because I don't know if people watched the sort of investigative days of decision videos I made. They were kind of sketchy. These might be too, but at least, you know, I've played it before and kind of have some memory of playing with this situation. So the Germans have sort of a requirement that they have to do the Rhineland occupied. If they don't take this on the first turn of the game, France can prevent them from then on. On the first turn, though, they're guaranteed to be able to do it because they're first position. They're above France. The requirements for this, they're the same in this, I believe. I looked it up. French do not now occupy the Rhineland, and initiative is less than the French initiative. If the French move in and occupy the Rhineland, that causes potential problems. There's reasons the Germans might want to leave that option open. For one thing, the French, if they do occupy, start depressing and causing problems with U.S. entry for the rest of the game if they take that action. And if they stay there and squat in the Rhineland, they're causing real problems. On the other hand, it has a couple of factories and a couple of resources, one of which the Germans already had, that Germany kind of desires. And so, you know, yeah, I probably don't need the resources that bad. I have a 1/2 multiplier, but occupying it seems like an important thing just to make sure it happens. That has a couple of effects. For one thing, it has the political effects listed here, which I've recorded on the map with little plus and minus markers, just as I would with the days of decision map. I'm going to try to not have to use that. I don't really have except as a reference. It'll be useful for some things like calculating production and stuff, perhaps, if it's correct. I'm not even sure it is. Belgium loses any French alliance, and they had one at the beginning of the game. And let's see if it had anything else here. That's about it. And now the Germans can move into the Rhineland. It's considered part of Germany, and you know, it's a good way to start the game off, just because if the Germans don't do that, they may not get it. So what else? Well, now the Germans get the opportunity to trigger a minor power, if I recall my sequence of play correctly. I don't have the DoD3 sequence of play. You know, I may end up printing out the whole damn rule set, but as of right now, yeah, we activate a minor, and then we see if the phase ends, which will happen. I don't remember what the likelihood of that is. If not, repeat 1 to 4 for your next bit, or go to C. Ending political affairs. After resolving, you roll 2 dice. You subtract 1 for each option played previously. Add 2 to the total if major powers are at war with each other, a significant number of them, and you have to roll less than or equal to a 3. So we'll be rolling at a 3. But at first I have to choose who I want to trigger. Now I certainly don't want to trigger a place that has a +1 on it, because that could be valuable to me at a later stage in the game. Well, conceivably, if they're already kind of in the German camp here, and this is impossible for me to see because of the lamp right over my head. If they're already in the German camp, something like Austria, I might want to move. but unfortunately Austria did not like this action. So what I'd like to do is get rid of a negative. Now I could get rid of the Austrian negative. Belgium has a 3. I could move Belgium 1 space. That doesn't seem terribly valuable. So, what is it, Hungary? Hungary has a -1. They're not going to go anywhere if I trigger that. Yeah, let's trigger the Hungary one. And that's just going to go away without any effect. Now, in addition, I had a counter tray somewhere. This is going to be a real problem remembering to find all my counter trays wherever I have them hidden at any given time. In addition, what we forgot was U.S. entry. U.S. entry for this act is, if I can find the thing I've hidden, this is a base of 4. Now the rules, wherever I have them here, state U.S. entry is going to be tripled for this, and what that means is 4 times 3 is 12. I'm going to have an automatic chit entered into the entry pool, and then on a 1 or a 2, I get a second chit. A 10 is not a 1 or a 2, so I cut over here, shift some counter trays around. And yeah, this will be easier without a camera in my hand. Reach into my pool of things and find myself a German one. Now I'm going to put this, I don't know how to indicate the difference between tensions and entry. This is an entry chit. I'm going to put this over here, I guess, and the U.S. can peek at it. He's got 4 entry points against Germany at this point. That's what the 12 got him. We're not going to be using the Days of Decision entry chits. We're using the DoD 3 use with final editions U.S. entry because it works a little better. Now 4 is probably not going to do me any good. We could look very quickly here to see. I have a few things that maybe I can do if I want to look them up, but they're all against Japan, so they're not going to count on my German entry. So, you know, it's not until I get a fairly high amount that I could deal with Germany. Now, Italy has its own little numbers, as do the Allies. The democracies will not have a tension pool. For whatever that's worth. And at some point or another, we'll have to record these on paper when the counter mix runs out. But there's always going to be a little bit of uncertainty there. And now we make the roll. If we get a 3 or less, the turn ends, well, the political phase of the turn ends. It does not, so we'll be pushing on to the Brits, and they get to pick their action. Nobody has any reaction they can take to the Rhineland, and that's one of the reasons it's really an awesome first pick. Is it's, you know, you want this, take it right away. You don't want it, don't bother. And then that also, as I mentioned, it's going to increase the production that Germany has. Okay, well, I ran into another anomaly with what I'm trying to do. When I count up resources here, I have 8 factories in Germany and 9 resources. Now, when I count it up here, I'm starting to record these, I come up with 19 factories and 11, well, 8 resources. I don't know if that's to account for additional factories which could have been produced in the interwar years between 36 and 41. That seems like a huge amount, though. Far more than should be present. In addition, nowhere in the DoD 3 rules do I find anything about when you're playing with Whiff, final edition, to withdraw some of the factories because they need to be produced still. So I'm going to play with the factories that I find on the map in Whiff final edition. However, I did go looking for errata on this, and while I did that, I came across these. Now these were all printed up on one sheet. These are apparently the corrected production multipliers, as opposed to the ones here. So, for example, Germany starts at a half. Well, they start at a half here, but there's additional spaces. And those spaces don't take you up to 4. They take you only up to 1.5. So those extra factories are of some importance in terms of aligning you to the proper number. So you'll probably get the same total production, but at the beginning of the game you have a higher production value. I think that's actually intended this way, and if I wish to build factories, I'm going to be building so few. In my game of Days of Decision, I think Britain built a factory. You know, it's such an expense when you have other things to do, even if it's, you know, economically advantageous to do so. The multiplier handles additional industrialization, etc., I think. So my feeling is to go with what's on the map here. It may be that these factories are actually correctly represented on the DoD3 map. I saw an image of the DoD3 map. It looks a lot like the T map, but it says 3 up here. And if they were changing that, they may have changed other things. Apparently, though, they screwed up this and didn't get the production multipliers correct. So that's what we're doing, and you know, it's going to be slow going, especially this first turn, because I am recording shit, like, you know, calculating out what the actual production is going to be at the beginning of the game, and some of that's going to be kind of tricky because you can't always supply all the production. We'll be able to get our convoys out where we need them, but that too is going to be a pain in the ass setting them up for this first turn. You know, I could have done it before I started playing, but I'd rather sail them out. I've got them spread out to where they're close to those locations, but it is possible that there could be issues that come into play that prevent things from producing quite the way they should. Anyway, what's kind of neat about these is they're going to give me room to store the U.S. Entry and tensions right on there, rather than keeping them bumping around off. And I reused my little note sticky pads, although these might not work too well, to fasten the sheets. Cut off the little sticky strips and put them there. Okay, yeah, I'm pretty lame about stuff like that. All right, I still haven't figured out what to do with Britain. I'll probably not be going into detail about everybody's economic, political actions, because the system is pretty close to what was in existence in DoD2, and I'm using a bastardized system where I'm mainly using the DoD2 rules, except where they don't work. One thing that I also learned is I think there's an initiative track that corresponds better with the DoD initiative track. I'm going to use my little fix for it. It may not be exact, but it's better than doing all kind of stupid calculations in my head, the way that DoD2 suggests. So, we go forward. Okay, let's look at the political options taken. I haven't finished up my economic information here. I still need to fill in for the powers that didn't get a turn, but as I was making my decisions, I needed the turn information. So, let's look. Well, Germany, we know what they did. They occupied the Rhineland. Britain and France both got to go. Britain did a alliance with France. We have a marker here. They also did an economic deal where, somewhere. I'm giving the French a resource out of South Africa if they can get it. It's just a matter of the British seem to have a little bit more raw materials than the French do, and I figured I'd send that over. Our next one is Italy. France had to waste a pick on accepting the treaty. The Italian did, they did an economic on a miner to get some oil from Iraq. I hope I have enough convoys to haul that. I'm assuming I do. If I don't, I can build more, but I kind of want to build up a stockpile of oil. I'm planning on playing with the optional oil rolls, and it becomes pretty damn important in that case. And finally, we got all the way down to Japan, the 5th player here. I'm using the normal 6-sided dice for this. I don't know what DoD3 uses. I know it uses 10-sided dice, but it's got to have a different mechanism. I want rules that I have printed, and I don't want to have to print out. I printed out a lot of the DoD3 rulebook, mainly the events, which I said is like 30 pages, but there's like 60 pages of rules or so, and I don't want to print all of it out when I think I have most of the mechanism in play, even if it's a little bit, wanky in terms of using some 6-siders there. Japan did Tojo, which is awesome because Tojo gives them 2 points of political effectiveness here. Comes at a big price in terms of U.S. entry, though. They got 2 or 3 chits there. The Brits also had to pay a decent number of chits, though, in terms of the French situation. There's an option which allows you to do it in the other order, to allow the accepting player to take some of the penalty and some of the cost, I think. I don't really want to screw around with that. I think Britain's the more initiative force, so the ill will has to apply more to them. So if I wanted to do it quickly like I did, and I really didn't have too many other options I wanted to do with Britain. In my examination game, I actually spent, I think, on their first activation, where they're up here, to try to improve their political effectiveness, and I actually got a point off that. So at this point, after I figure out the economics for those, we go to the Whiff, move pieces around. And the only really interesting thing that's going to be happening there is down here, the attacks on Ethiopia, which we're in the Mediterranean zone here, or I can't see. Oh no, this cuts down. So this is the Mediterranean zone. It's hard to read this map in the lighting that I have. This map is much more visible. One advantage to the newer style of map. But the Mediterranean zone is in storm, at least for the first impulse. So it's going to cause some problems, especially for the air power and this, that, and the other. And that's all mountainous terrain, so that's not going to be pleasant to fight our way through. And it wasn't historically. And then we go to the actual production, where we gotta bring the resources home on the convoys and build the actual units, set initial gearing limits as to what we buy, and those are gonna be kind of hard to cope with because we're gonna have excess. Well, the real thing is nobody's really gearing up for a war at this point, so nobody's probably going to build too much. A lot of the focus may be on getting navies into the construction pool, so that I can build up a force a little bit more when tensions in Europe start increasing. Right now there's no real big motivating force, although it might be worthwhile for someone like Britain or France to start building up an army to make Germany think twice. The problem with that, of course, is you're spending your points on that. Points are very rare at this point in the game. With these low production multipliers, a quarter for Britain and France, a half for Germany. And it's going to make it hard for them to find the points to start building up military forces. They might find it more economically feasible to try to improve their political situation. There are a few things they can do. They can go for the PM value, invest in that. Gearing is tough. So I haven't really looked at these on camera, but they have a number of pieces of information. One of which is if you're, I guess, declared war by another player, you immediately get a boost. If that player's, one of the ones that's listed in your little sheet to get you that high. I guess if Germany attacks, you boost up to here, and then you'd be, if you were already here, you could boost up to here, but no higher. That's just a free boost for being declared war on. Another thing is if your home country is invaded, you get free boosts. So that makes it very, very difficult to do sort of like an early preemptive war at low values, because if you succeed in invading, you're going to start boosting up your enemy's production capabilities, and he's probably going to be able to turn on you. So the game kind of doesn't really allow France to very easily just go in and invade Germany. Not that the old DoD did particularly either, because France could never be the leader. You know, the leading activity had to be by one of the fascist powers, really, because the democracies don't have free reign and gearing limits. Now, additionally, there's certain years, and you have free reign once you reach those years. And if I recall correctly, it costs more to gear up when you're not matching the year. So even if, you know, the fascists gear up and I have the opportunity to gear up, it's going to cost me more of an investment to do so. So I may actually want to withhold hitting the gearing limits. There always was an inhibitor in the sense of the U.S. Involvement. The U.S. involvement would end up being greater if you went earlier, and that's reflected over on the cards here. You know, as the years go on, the U.S. is less affected by what you do kind of militarily and diplomatically. But now there's also this, it's going to cost me more money, and what I'm getting out of this is more money, essentially. So I can probably do a balancing act, and I would guess that, you know, I mean, obviously the balancing act's going to tilt further away from trying to increase production, but it may have gone so far that that's not even really an economically feasible possibility. Anyway, that's what's going forward. It may take me forever to get through one turn just because I have to record so much information down here. I'm going to have to think about, I haven't yet, maybe next turn, the naval limits. Right now, if I got things right, I'm not sure because the new values are different, but if I've got things right, Germany and France are penalized in their political effectiveness by the fact that they have weak navies. If whoever's in second place out of those accepts the naval treaty, that puts them in a position where their political effectiveness is not as weakened. But always the last place player, even if they accept the naval treaty, is unable to escape the penalty. And by accepting the naval treaty, you actually limit the ceiling for how far your Navy can actually grow. In terms of that ceiling is relative to the other players, though. So since you're probably using the naval treaty to avoid being in last or second to last place, probably not too worried about trying to boost your Navy into one of the top ones on the board. People like England, the US, Japan, possibly Germany or Italy, might have a strong interest in building up their navies. By the way, Russia's been added into the naval treaty for what they matter, and they may actually be the low man on the totem pole, which would be kind of problematic in terms of what I've got recorded, but that's just work I don't want to do before I get started. It won't have too much effect. I've already made some mistakes in terms of placing these chits too late. I forgot about the French-British treaty and had to look that up after some other people had already triggered nations. And I tried to balance things, but there's only so far you can go. All right. Initiative's a little wanky in this game. I want to handle that a little on camera. So the initial initiative starts off with the Axis at +2, the Soviets at +1, and the democracies at 0. And we just roll 3 dice. And let's see. Germans get +2, so they're at 12, 11, 9. So we're going to go in that order, and we'll grab another set of initiative chits. To show the ordering there. I don't know what that additional communist one is. And then what we're going to do is, what is it? 1, 2. That's going to be our placement with the fascists and communists going in the 1 box, and then the democracies going off in the 3 box. That's because of the terrible weather that we have. We have 3 steps. I've shown this in the regular Whiff thing, but we ended up in one of these with 3 steps in between each one. There's only a +1 to the die roll modifier, which gets us into the really bad weather that happens at the edges of this chart. And that weather does seem to get, well, it may not. What is B? Oh, B is blizzard. Yeah, really bad weather at the edges of, at the high end of this chart, but that's okay. And I don't know how much the fascists have. The Italians have the big effect here. So we're looking at storms in the Mediterranean. Now this doesn't affect desert as much, but it will affect the mountain here. This is desert mountain, but this is regular mountain. So storms have a penalty to air. Air can't be done. Have a penalty to land attacks. Yeah, we're really not in a great position to launch an attack here, I don't think. Let's see what I have. I have 5, 9, 10. Looks like 14. These are too far up. They can't be there. I'll put them here. Give me some interlocking zones. So if I could get that full 14 into play, and I could, because I'm allowed to start here. If I got that full 14 into play against this, that would still only be 3-1 with 2 odd ships against me. That doesn't sound very good. I'm not going to use the other chart, the 2 dice system. You know, I got enough charts. I'm printing out another one or trying to look in the back of the book each turn. Each time I need to roll a land attack. Just seems like too much of an effort. I'll use the one I'm familiar with. And over here things are much, much worse, because we only have 6 strength points against 4. So we're probably not going to be seeing much of anything. I'm going to be tracing supply back to the headquarters here, and then to Mogadishu. Now that's only limited supply if I don't get some convoys down there. Right now the Suez is open to me, so I should be able to get my convoys moved into place there. So I won't have any problems. I think you can set up with your convoys already in place. But that's going to be the big thing. And then I also have to work out, hey, how many convoys does it take the Germans to get the 1 resource from Sweden? I think it's just 1 convoy, but and who else has resources? The Italians have resources they have to get out of Iraq, which are going to be, you know, situation where they actually have to get up to the Gulf, I believe, to get those resources through there, which is, again, probably not too big a deal at this point. I figured the oil is worthwhile. All right, on to the land phase, I guess. And we basically spent the first impulse of the game getting the convoys into place. You know, the Brits have theirs going out to Canada's east coast. The U.S. has a mandatory convoy it has to bring out to connect up with Japan, and then the Japanese convoy getting that's because they have an exchange going on. Now that the Brits and the French have an exchange, well, the Brits can haul it, the extra resource, up to France. Actually, the French don't have enough convoys to reach French Indochina. the way I see it. Conceivably, I could pull this off here, but there are resources down here in Africa I need. Now, none of this is too important actually right now. For supplying troops, it's important where I have forces, but someplace like in West Africa, there are no troops, so there's not really a need for a convoy there, but I would like to have the convoy set up. The reason it's not necessary in practice right now is you can trace through neutral territories for delivering goods. So, you know, the Italians can run through Turkey and through the Balkans and they're fine. But I wanted to make sure that they have the naval connection. Now, they have a problem. You know, if they're at war with Britain, they don't get through Alexandria, they don't get this oil, la la la. But so anyway, no military action other than moving those happened. I've got I've set this up so that I've got the fascists and communists up here. They will have a chance of the turn ending, and depending on what the weather is, and it's got a penalty on it, that one point that I've got marked there, as I did with the normal Whiff game, to indicate that there's a modifier to the die roll. So it could be that impulses take a lot of segments. Let's see, the first one was here, then here, then yeah, that's correct. So yeah, this could be a very short turn, and really there's not that big a goal for Italy here, but I'm about pooped for the night. I've spent a few hours on this first turn. Now granted, a lot of it's bookkeeping and setting up. Once I get into the DoD side of things, it's not going to be as painful, but it is going to be harder than DoD itself was, just because I've got so much map, not counting really the Asian map until the Japanese start attacking in China. But I've got so much map to deal with and so little, you know, there's these informational markers spread out all over it, and it becomes harder to see what's going on than it was on the DoD2 map. But on the other hand, this is what I wanted to do, right? I guess. I don't know. You know, people voted the hell out of Whiff and the DoD-Whiff combination that I wanted to do. So I felt like doing one of these big vote getters, and you know, this one seems like something I haven't played in a long time that I'd like to take another look at. So there we are. Okay, so the weather just got even worse. Clumsy this early in the morning. It's, I gotta look up, I don't know what the effects are of the number. It's gonna be a 3 pip effect. So 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3. This is where we're going to be on the next axis impulse, with a modifier of 2 to the weather die roll. We ended up with blizzards up here, which, as you can imagine, are going to be worse than snow. Snow in the Mediterranean, and that includes, I believe, Ethiopia. So the divide comes here, and then I'm not quite sure where. It seems to cut down to here. I don't think it cuts across the land. And this would be the southern temperate zone, which has rain anyway. Rain's not good. I mean, the Italians don't have a good force there to handle the Ethiopians. I may have too many Ethiopians, as I've brought up before. So I may want to ship some forces down. We got storms then in the southern monsoon? Yeah, storms in the southern monsoon, and the northern monsoon is fair. And I might want to make some hats over here too, to you know, to cover what's going on up here. So I have an Arctic. I'd want another blizzard for that this time. And a North Temperate, which would also have a blizzard. Just so that I don't have to scan between maps to handle things. But that's a minor effect. Essentially, nothing's going to happen. The only question I have is, do I want to ship any forces from Italy? And I kind of don't want to ship a mechanized unit into Ethiopia, because a mechanized unit, whenever it flips over, is going to turn into an oil eater. Of course, the plane is too, so maybe I'm going to need air power. So maybe I do want to ship it, but right now I have no forces in Italy to defend it, and someone could do something terrible if I pulled my unit out of there. I doubt that they can. I mean, France can't just declare war on Italy, but Germany could, for example. And that might be something I just don't want to open up the possibility for. So I think essentially we have nothing going on during this activation. I've already got all my convoys spread out. The Italians don't want to do anything. So I'll show you how the how I'm working the impulse chart for this. It should be here. Okay. So first an axis turn happens. I do whatever I'm doing on the turn, and it's over. And then I roll a die to see if the axis fails. Now, theoretically, I could be passing here, but I'm not going to. And I get a 4, which isn't going to end it. Now a Soviet turn happens, same thing. They move their stuff, and nothing to move. And we make a pass roll, and again, we're trying to reach that 1 there. If we get a 1 or less, it ends. But there's a pass. Now, whether the pass should affect... In normal Whiff, it would be a 2-point pass. But there's only 1 power passing, even though it's all the powers on the side. I'm going to only give the Soviets a 1-point ability to affect the end of turn. And I may do the same with the Western Allies. Although, I don't know. 10, they're not going to pass. Now, the impulse moves 1, 2, 3 to here. And the Commonwealth gets to go. And they, too, will pass. They're not particularly interested in seeing if the weather clears up and the Ethiopians can be attacked, which is really the only interesting thing here. And they're going to have, because everybody's passing on their side and there's more than 1 power, I'm going to give them the 2-point shift, which gives them on a 6 or less, they end the turn. And boom, the turn, the impulse track ends. Now, I haven't been able to find one way or another, but I believe this effect, but from the chart, I believe that affects the next turn's impulse. There's going to be a +2 on the beginning of the turn. And just pull these up. And now, basically, we go to the production phase. And I should probably zoom in on that a little bit, and I want to prepare a little before I go into detailed explanations. Okay, I think the easiest way to handle this is to just pick one country and look at it. And I think the most interesting country at this point is Italy, because they have some reason to build military units. The first thing is the production itself. So I look at Italy's production, and they have 11 factory points and some 5 resources available. How do I count that? Well, factories, I just count their factories on the board. Resources, I just count their resources on the board. This is tough. Somewhere I think they're listed, and I may have my numbers wrong. Well, so they're listed in the World in Flames global war scenario, but that's not quite right, because, for example, Germany's will include Czechoslovakia and Austria, and possibly other areas that were absorbed. So, mostly they should be correct, though, but my counting skills might not be good. Anyway, what I have to do is I've already gone over this in World in Flames, and it's sort of a mishmash of the World in Flames and the Days of Decision point totals. Mainly, the Days of Decision gives me this track that I can keep the points, but I can keep them in a bank, which is a little different from how World in Flames does things. I'm not sure I approve entirely. My feeling is you shouldn't be able to do what you can do in Days of Decision, which is throw down a huge army in 2 months. So I think what I'm going to somewhat I think I'm going to look up the Days of Decision 3 integration with Whiff rules and see if they actually handle that, because that's always bothered me. I don't think they do. Got US entry here, that's a later rule. Action stage, and I don't have enough spit. That's converting to last impulse test. Yeah, production is not covered in here, but I'm really uncomfortable with being able to produce more military goods than your production for the turn, and to tell you the truth, I think if playing with World in Flames, you can't do that because you've got to follow the World in Flames rules for the most part. So, yeah, that's going to be my military gearing limit, really. I can't just slap down a huge army all at once like I can in Days of Decision. So that's kind of cool, actually. So the only thing DoD really actually gives me is the track to keep the money on, as opposed to having to keep it on paper. Okay. So what I figure using the World in Flames rules is I look at my divisor, or multiplier, which is 1/3 for Italy, and I get that off of here. That's how it's tracked, but I want the multiplier. That's how many factories I can actually use. So out of my 11 factories, 1/3 of them, it's 3 point something big, which rounds up to 4. So I have 4 production points if I haul 4 of my resources. That means one of my resources I don't have to haul there. What I'm going to do is I'm going to make that the oil resource, and I'm going to drag that over here to Mogadishu because I may need oil to recover things. And we're going to be storing up the oil that we get out of Iraq, which is traversing, essentially this is duplicated over here to get to Mogadishu. And I could go through the Red Sea to get it up to Italy. You can see where the Suez is becoming very important to Italy, though, one way or another. Now, what does Italy want to do with their 4 points? Well, that's a good question. I would like to buy some military capacity so that I can have something here. And here we follow Whiff-like rules again. And by the way, I had a horrible accident last night. I didn't mention at the time because I wasn't as whiny as I am now, but this damn pipe is sloped in such a way and doesn't pack very tightly, and a burning ember fell into my Japanese counter tray and put a hole in it. It doesn't really affect anything unless I want to keep liquid resources in there or little tiny beads, but still. So I need to buy something, and my build pool is here, really. Well, I don't have a whole hell of a lot I can buy. It looks like my infantry's all on the board. But I can buy this little motorized division. Is that enough to defend everything? I don't know. But I'm gonna spend $2. That's the cost here, and it's gonna take 3 turns to build this motorized division. We're here in January, February, 1-2 turns. And I'm not going to worry about being on the correct... See, these numbers here are to indicate how long it would build, so theoretically this should go here to indicate it's a 3-build thing. But that doesn't make sense to me. I'm interested in sorting them by nationality. I don't know why I really care which track they're on, or which groove of the record they're on. Okay, so that cost me, what, $2 out of my 4 production. So I get 2 extra bucks back. And I might also want to be laying down some ships, but I'm going to hold off on that right now because I feel like I've spent more than I should anyway. Now, I didn't have to spend the oil resource because I didn't need that for my production total. My production total, the way it worked out, I had an extra resource, and that's kind of cool. So I guess that's Italy's production. And I've already got the bid numbers from the DoD side. So the 3 people who didn't get turns get bid bonuses for next turn equal to their effectiveness. So for example, the Soviets get a +2 to their next bid, which I've got marked down here. If you've been watching most of the vids I have, you'll get a lot of this is just repeat, but we won't be doing it in this detail again. And well, I guess I go on to other producers, and I think we're going to see people laying down navies with some of their points. Oh, one important thing I have to mark down. Under Italy, I have to write down that I have a motorized unit. Actually, it's a motorized division in my gearing pool. That probably doesn't matter, but basically, I'm only allowed to move my gearing limits by 1 each turn. So the Italians next turn can build 1 of everything and up to 2 motorized infantry units. They're not going to have 2 motorized infantry units. And I'm really not too worried about gearing limits at this point in the game, but, you know, that's why I'm using this sheet the way I am, as opposed to just, you know, keeping a running tally of only the economic production. I also need to keep track of what you produced last turn. All right. Well, I realize there's a couple interesting things with the U.S. production. First of all, they have this humongous divisor. They've got 35 factories, I think, and some 36 resources. They can only build 1/20th of that, which is going to be 2 points. And there's a real issue with, do you want to build military units? Laying up a navy is really nice. Or do you need points to operate in the political sphere? I found that I was using up countries like the U.S. and China's points, who don't have a whole hell of a lot coming in initially, very heavily in my old Whiff game, in my old Days of Decision game, and really wasn't building any military units with them. Other countries like Britain and France, once they got their production multiples to stupid levels, which probably won't happen in this game just because the production is more limited for the Allies. I was able to stockpile huge amounts of money and went over the limits on the, well, went over what the track can support. So I built military units just because, you know, same with the Soviets, actually. They had huge amounts of money as well. The Germans felt like they had to build military, so I don't know. They and the Japanese did not catch up in terms of being utterly wealthy. But anyway, what's interesting about the U.S. here that I wanted to look into, one was I thought I might do some naval production. And I may go into how I would do it, but I don't think I'm going to because I need those points. But I have essentially 2 points, which means 2 of my resources go to production. And I'm gonna mark that on here. Now, I do have some boats I want to build. If I wanted to build a boat, I could take, say, this guy here and say, well, this is just a naval transport. But I could say, yeah, I want to put this on the board. So I could pay my $2. It would go 3 turns later, the white circled number, over to here, but it would go face down, which means it goes into the construction pool when it's completed. And that means then in another turn, what I could do is take it from the construction pool, pay the second amount, the 3 points, and it would be 3 turns later face up, and it would be then available on the map. Now, the repair pool is kind of like the construction pool, except you pay the cheaper first number to repair a ship. I think it may not take the full length of time to do so. I'd have to look that up. But I don't want to produce military units with the U.S. I just want to put the money away. But here's the problem. The U.S. produces 4, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, maybe more oil resources. 2 of them go to Japan, right? I think I actually counted 16 before. That means I have like 13 additional oil. I don't need it in production. And there's really no oil limitation on the U.S. and on the people it chooses to send oil to. So rather than record the U.S.'s oil, and I'm out of little counters to do so, I put a 2 in there, I'm just going to say they have essentially unlimited oil. I think. I don't know. I could build up big stacks. There's no limitation to the countermix for this. Big stacks of these white things. But, you know, they have as much as they need. The, what, 13, 14 oil that I have in reserve, that's probably enough to get a country, you know, halfway through a couple of years in Whiff. I don't know. I guess I'll start recording it, and we'll see what happens. But the Commonwealth is also going to be in that kind of situation where they just have ridiculous amounts of oil. And honestly, once things start going big, oil becomes an important concern. You really do need those oil reserves. So I definitely want to keep track of it for the powers that have a low access to oil. They're going to have trouble. But even other countries like France or Russia are going to have some trouble dealing with their oil situation. France probably won't, but Russia has, I think, significant oil production. But when they're, you know, using their whole front and unflipping armored units, that's going to be somewhat of a cost. And the reason for that is the unflipping cost. Basically, you can unflip 5 units for each oil that you have that they can trace as if they're tracing supply to. Well, you know, we've seen, and it's only certain kinds of units. So navies, airplanes, and armored, mechanized, and I think motorized as well, all require oil to unflip. But those are your good stuff, and Germany's just, you know, flush with good stuff, right? They rely on the air power and the armor to do what they're wanting to do, and it becomes a real limitation on what they're going to be able to do. I think it also costs an oil to build an offensive jet, for whatever that's worth. You could almost always come up with 1 oil. So oil was not a big deal without this optional rule, but it becomes a really, really important issue when you have it in place. Surprised Russia doesn't have an offensive chip to begin with. So they'll never buy one. They start on Barbarossa era with one. All right, I guess that's enough babble. I got that. And this is pretty much the turn. We'll see if I have anything else, and otherwise I might be just loading this up. One more thing I wanted to take into account. Before I make some production decisions, I feel like I have to look at the naval treaty limits. Now this is what I counted on board. Number of ships here. So France, for example, has 14, and then they have a multiplier based on DOD3, which brings them up to 42. When I did the balancing, France doesn't end up last. The US does. Maybe I did something wrong. Notably, what would make sense as wrong is if I didn't count, say, the repair pool, although I think France actually has more ships there, or maybe even the construction pool holdings. It feels a little harsh to me to count the construction pool. The repair pool seems sensible, but I just counted on math. That way when ships come in and out, they'll affect that. Now, there's a problem with this, so I decided to look at the Whiff, at the DoD3 rules for converting Whiff over, and they have numbers, and their numbers don't match. Some of them do, some of them don't. So like the US, I don't remember what they were at, like 40 something, and I'm just not seeing it. Maybe there are ships I didn't count, but I counted East and West Coast, I think, and came up with 22 capital ships. That's actually quite a bit. The Commonwealth at 39, they were listed as 19, which would put them way in last place, and they clearly don't have 19 ships. That might be a typo, but and some of the other numbers were correct, like the Japanese were absolutely correct, which means, you know, if the Japanese reflection doesn't include the production circle, why would the US one? I have no idea. I'm going to go with what I have, and that means the US is now penalized instead of France, and I think that's fine. It may be that there was a different multiplier in mind or something. I really have no idea what they're doing there, and like so much of the stuff related to this game or anything by the company that I've seen, it's a little dodgy, and you know, you figure out your ways around it. And there isn't really a lot of online maybe over in the Consim World folder for World in Flames there's some discussion of stuff like this, but there isn't a whole hell of a lot online about this kind of thing, so screw it, man. It's back to the 90s, you know, the way I had to deal with EU and stuff like that, although there's tons of online material to try to bring EU into conformance with itself. All right. And I think I'm essentially done with the turn. We'll move into the March-April turn. Now we've got some new ships entering the construction pool here. I can place them immediately in the pool. Normally reinforcements are going to happen during the Whiff, the tactical side of the game, after the political stuff is done. The reason for that is if you want to prepare for an attack and you don't want to telegraph it, you can set it up that way. Now, production, one interesting thing happened, and there's something else I want to go into about it. The interesting thing that happened was Germany commissioned one of their repairs, and indeed that only takes two turns to activate a repaired ship, and it costs that lesser value. So that's going to be available in May, June, and the reason for that is that'll boost them above the Russian naval level, and they were in second to last place. Now they'll be in third to last place. They'll get rid of their -1 modifier and hand that over to Russia, and they see that as really a bonus in so many ways in terms of political effectiveness. Other than that, well, so these are done secretly, the allocation of reinforcements, which is not clear in Days of Decision itself, and I was playing that, so it was open, so players would bid up their navies. You don't have that here, but then again, the navies don't just automatically appear either. You have to go through some effort to produce them, some time. There's a lot of effort here also in terms of what are you doing, right? You want points for your political side of things, but if you have intentions to enact things later, for example, with the naval pool, if you want that to give you an effectiveness bonus, you have to kind of pre-plan and build your ships in advance, right? You can't just slap them down like you used to. to do that. But also, if you have an intention to conduct some kind of military campaign, you have to build up for it. You have to prepare for it. It's not a game where you can just slap down a bunch of points and say, yeah, I'm ready, you know, with Russia to invade Finland now. No, Russia's nowhere near ready to invade anything. And, you know, even if they bought everything now, to make a move in 36 would be really tough. They would have to be spending all their political capital building up their army, and then they're not going to be advancing their production limits. And that's all a really neat thing about integrating the two that you don't see in the DoD rule situation itself. Okay, one more thing. There's these resource markers. I don't know what to do with them. Whiff allows you to stockpile those. I feel a little queasy about stockpiling as much oil as I'm allowing myself. So, for example, Germany actually only stockpiled one additional oil because they needed the rest for their production. And that immediately becomes a concern. Hey, I need to get more resources that are non-oil so I can stockpile oil. But Russia and the U.S., Russia stockpiled 10 oil this term. You know, Japan stockpiled from the U.S., some of the U.S. oil that's in place. These things make it, you know, the U.S. has its strategic reserve nowadays, but I don't know how big that strategic reserve was pre-World War II. And likewise with other countries, I don't know how much they were willing to extract the oil and pay storage costs and stuff. If you watched my playthrough of, it's probably hidden down here somewhere. I can't find it. But the very cool game after the Holocaust, which I don't see it at all. I've got it kicking around somewhere. It may be in the file cabinet because the box is so demolished. There's a cost to storing raw materials, and there's a depreciation amongst them. Yeah, it's not going to happen over a couple of months, but it will happen over several years if you're preparing for war in 39, right? So there is an effect to, there is going to be a cost to storing that good. So anyway, that's one factor there. How much these governments could afford to withhold oil resources that maybe they needed for their overall, 5-year plans or whatever. Again, hard to tell really. And then when you go to these other resources, man, that becomes even harder. Now I'm gonna kind of use those other ones and say you can stockpile them come a certain status. I don't know what it is. Maybe maximum peacetime production. If you're not there, you can't stockpile them because it just doesn't make sense. The government would not be saying, yeah, let's buy up all the iron we can produce and store it. Coal, maybe, because there are still some coal-powered ships, I think. Not many. Yeah, they probably all got converted by now. But there's just a real question to how much of the economy, you're willing to devote to this wartime endeavor. And I kind of have to say the same with the oil. It feels like it's a little goofy to be stockpiling this much oil, but at least the oil has a use in the military phase. The resources just become sort of this, if I gear up later, I'll have this huge pool of resources if you're Britain or the US or Russia or China for that matter. That means I'll never ever have a problem with resources. Whereas what I was seeing in DoD 2 when I played that alone was, yeah, resources became a limitation in that game. People geared up and they couldn't meet their they couldn't produce fully with their factories, and I kind of like that atmosphere of it. The oil, yeah, you could burn that for it. So those countries that have a lot of oil have that ability to jumpstart a little better. I don't mind that too much. I wish there were stockpiling limitations even on the oil, though, just because a certain reserve, certainly the couple points you start off with, makes absolute sense. But these are going to get ridiculous very quickly. All right, I think we're done with the turn. I may have missed something that I'll go back to later, but it's almost time for me to go to work, and it's time for this to be loaded up.